Oh dear, it seems that my 9/11 video has brought out the trolls. I've had to delete an awful lot of comments. Also, I've received several personal emails, which is rather interesting because my own personal email address, well, the one that was used, isn't really published anywhere, so obviously someone's got it in for me. Now, all of these emails and comments have the same thing in common. They all start off by saying it couldn't have happened because there's no motive, and then it goes on to call me a moron, stupid, blah blah blah. And luckily I've got a hide like a rhinoceros. I delete the comments merely because they deface my work. Now, I've made this video in response to these people, and every time they prod me, guess what? I'm going to make another one. And let me give you a real smoking gun. Here's a real smoking gun. I'm going to read this directly, and it's from Jim Mars's book, The Terror Conspiracy Revisited, which is well worth a read on what happened in 9/11. Now, anybody who doubts what we've all been told about 9/11 is simply wrong must consider the words of John Farmer, the senior counsel to the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, better known as the 9/11 Commission, the official US government's investigative body of the attacks. On the second page of his 2009 book, The Grand Truth, the Story Behind America's Defense on 9/11, Farmer wrote, "In the course of our investigation into the national response to the attacks, the 9/11 Commission staff discovered that the official version of what had occurred on the morning of the September 11th, 2001, that is what government and military officials had told Congress, the Commission, the media and the public about who knew what and when, was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue." And Farmer himself, he clarified himself later on by writing how the public had been seriously misled about what occurred during the morning of the attacks. At some level of government, at some point in time, there was obviously an agreement not to tell the truth about what happened. So those who say, well, it's all rubbish, the person who was actually involved with the commission at a high level John Farmer, that is what he said. He said the commission knew that they were being lied to. So, that aside, what about motivation? Motivation. And nowhere is motivation more apparent than the destruction of Building 7. And I'll come to that in a minute. Let's take the incident itself. Now, obviously the government had a motive. They needed to juice up their war on Iraq. And despite the fact that most of these attackers came from Saudi Arabia, they didn't attack Saudi Arabia. What a surprise. They attacked Iraq. Now, in the basement of the Twin Towers, there was one heck of a lot of precious metals stored in vaults. Now, estimates vary, and the lowest estimate I've heard is $300 billion. The highest estimate I've heard is $1.5 trillion. And probably the most reliable one is over 1 ton of gold and 102 million ounces of silver. Now that's a lot of metal. And sure enough, fingers were pointed after 9/11, and people said, well, where is it? And first of all, people were denying that there was any gold or silver or anything stored in there at all. until some Brinks Mat records came to light, and they had to admit, well, yeah, there was some bullion stored there, but where did it go? Now, either it was taken out in the nick of time just before the attacks, and there is one witness who saw a lot of security vans a couple of days beforehand, or it melted. If it melted, it would have been found in the basement, and there's then an immediate outcry from certain people who say, oh, well, it just evaporated, gold's got a low melting point, and there was molten iron after all in the basement. Well, that doesn't kind of stack up either. The reason why is that gold vaporizes at 2600 degrees centigrade. Silver vaporizes at 1950 degrees centigrade. The molten steel in the basement, in order to be molten and not actually vaporizing itself, had to be at around about 1500 to 1600 centigrade. So that's well below the vaporization point. So there should have been big lumps of gold and silver mixed in with this molten steel. Is this what was found? No, they kind of threw it all away and shipped it to China and did all these other things that they're supposed to have done to it. Crazy. That's all regardless of the fact that the whole cause of the fire to start with, which was Jet A fuel. Now, when it's in a jet engine, under forced air pressure, burning as hot as it can go, 980 degrees centigrade, in open air, when it's not pressured and not being fed by a steady stream of high pressure air, something like 250 to 300 degrees centigrade. So nothing stacks up about this molten metal bit at all. Yet we know there was molten metal there. So here's motive number one, and it's an immediate motive. Motive number one is somewhere between 3 billion and 1.2 trillion or so in precious metals. Pretty good motive, really. Motive number two is the insurance. We all know that people have made multiple claims on things that disappeared and vanished during 9/11, including the owner of the lease on the buildings themselves. So he had every motive to be involved. Now I'm going to make a suggestion, and I'm suggesting that Building 7 was always designed to come down exactly the same way as Buildings 1 and 2. However, there was a bit of a problem, and that is that one of the aircraft, and there were supposed to be 3 aircraft in this attack, remember, one of which came down due to the heroic actions of the passengers who tackled the box cutter wielding suicide airmen. Now, it didn't happen, did it? Because this third aircraft was probably supposed to hit WTC-7, I believe. And we all remember the President Bush tape with him sitting in the school and being told about the attacks. You saw the man rush across, whisper in his ear. The president looks blank for a minute, and he carries on listening to the children read. This is my suggestion. It's only a suggestion, it's a supposition. My suggestion is, what if he wasn't being told about the attacks then? What if what was whispered was, one of the planes is missing? Building 7 hasn't been blown up. That would kind of explain the blank expression. It's an unexpected thing that he doesn't quite know how to deal with, and he doesn't know what's going to happen, and everything's racing through his mind, and so he takes a bit of time out to listen to the kids while he's actually thinking, geez, what do we do now? And of course we all know the decision was made then to pull Building 7 anyway, and the excuse was there's fires, and sure enough there are videos, or well, one video actually, of a fire in Building 7, but it's not exactly terrific, not compared to what you saw on WTC 1 and 2. In fact, you'd say, well, this is a regular run-of-the-mill type of fire that you get in an office. Did it justify demolishing the whole building? I think not. So what was in WTC 7? Well, apart from various financial offices, there was also a big CIA office, which was stuffed full of files. And I wonder how many times recently there's been a Freedom of Information Act with documents that people know exist, but sorry, they were in WTC 7 when it burnt down. You can't see it because it no longer exists. In fact, we don't even know what's in it. Like they don't microfilm the damn things anyway. So yeah, there's another motive. That's, I believe, why Building 7 had to come down. Probably had all the juicy CIA files in there about things like the Kennedy assassination and various other things. And with freedom of information getting more and more advanced and getting more teeth, and people digging out more and more that leads to other documents, etc., etc., there's certainly plenty of things that the CIA wanted to get rid of, and that was a good way of doing it. And now for another motive. There was a huge amount of front-run trading, a lot of shorting of stocks on airlines and the airline industry and aviation in general in the day or so leading up to the attacks. So somebody knew something, possibly multiple somebodies knew something. So there's another motive. Stock market, insider trading. Then we come to what happened afterwards, the Iraq War. Who made billions, if not trillions, of dollars supplying armaments, supplying meals for the troops, supplying all the things it takes for a modern war to get off the ground? That's another motivation. Who got trillions of dollars worth of contracts to rebuild Iraq after the war? And who's on the boards of those companies? So to those of you who say that there's no motive, no possible motive for 9/11, then we have to, or I have to, say actually there's quite a lot of motives, and the more you dig, the more motives you find, and the more money there is. I mean, with what I've got so far, that's 1, 2, 3, getting on for $4 trillion worth of motive, which is quite a lot. You could probably hire some mercenary group to do 9/11 for what, a couple of $100 million. A profitable enterprise. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit of a rant, but these emails, they haven't got my goat, they've just made me a little bit angry. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and well, you probably haven't enjoyed it actually, but I just hope that it's useful. Thank you very much.
Well, I spend loads of time on YouTube, and I expect you do too, right? You know, I kept searching for things, and this Arduinotronic channel came up on all my searches for all types of interesting crap. What's on it? That's a bit difficult to explain. Just subscribe. I did.